Over 2 years ago, I visited a minifigure stall at my local Christmas market and bought these 3 fake Lego minifigures, and they were surprisingly alright. And so a few weeks ago, I went to the same stall and did the same thing again, but this time I left with a lot less money and a lot more regret. Let me show you what I bought, and I'll let you decide whether or not I got scammed here. I'm ashamed to say that this all started this year because of this admittedly great selection of Skibidi Toilet minifigures, which caught my eye as I was walking by. I of course had to get one, like these will be collector's items in the future, and so I picked up this guy. And here it is in all its glory. I was pretty surprised to see that it came in its own plastic bag. I was honestly expecting him to just throw it in pre-assembled and call it a day. This bag tells us to keep it away from babies and that the product contain mini parts and provide against the children to eat, which is a shame. The set comes with 3 printed faces and 3 different hair pieces, which was honestly pretty generous. And the faces themselves have surprisingly great printing, like they're very detailed and very accurate, which was, again, fairly surprising. The hair pieces are smaller than a normal minifigures, which lets them fit on the noticeably smaller head pieces, which I'm assuming were made that way so that they fit inside the toilet itself, which was really important. As a result though, they can't be placed on regular studs, which I'm not sure is worth the trade-off, to be honest. It doesn't come with any instructions, but it was fairly intuitive to put together. Like, there's only 6 pieces in the build to think about, really. Although having a reference image does make things easier. The clutch power on them is decent, and 5 of these pieces fit together fine, but the toilet doesn't actually connect to the base fully. Like, you can't get it flush, no matter how hard you push them together. The slick hairpiece also has a fairly sharp piece of plastic poking out the back, which really isn't great. Overall, this figure is slightly better than I expected. 6 out of 10. The next figures I decided to pick up, for some fucking reason, were these Rick and Morty figures, and straight away, at a glance, these guys run into the same issue I had with the official Squidward figure, or the fake Luigi figure from a few years ago, and that I think the standard minifigure head shape just doesn't work for these characters. Rick's head is supposed to be oversized, long, and oval-shaped in the show, and Morty's is also very oversized and very round, to a point that I think both of these guys should have had specifically molded headpieces with noses and everything. Rick comes with 2 face prints. I much prefer the second one personally, and a hairpiece that is just completely wrong, to be honest, like it's not even close. Both face prints also seem to forget that he has a unibrow and that it's supposed to be the same color as his hair, because they just gave him these 2 circles, didn't print any color in him, and just called it a day. His torso print is fine, but it does have this bit of skin visible at the top that's a shade too dark compared to his headpiece, and when you compare it to the shade of brown of his pants, it sort of strongly implies that he's completely naked from his belt down to his socks, which is a strange choice. This wouldn't be a problem if they'd just made his pants darker and his skin lighter. These leg pieces aren't quadruple molded like they seem to be, but instead they went with printing all around the back and sides of the figure, which I never think is necessary or good looking, but that's what they went with. And the weird thing about them is that there's this doubled up outline all the way around him, and I'm not sure why that's there or what it's supposed to be. And the lack of dual molding for his shoes makes it look like he's wearing white trainers as opposed to black shoes with white socks. The printing on the ends of his lab coat are also incomplete, as they're missing a part of the outline for some reason. The print quality for his shoes are also pretty messy, and there's a large ridge of plastic each side of his crotch area that shouldn't be there. They've really biffed the design work on these leg pieces, like I'm really not a fan. One area this figure isn't lacking in though is clutch power, to a fault I would say. Trying to place him onto his display stand and then take him off again requires way more force than you would expect. It's kind of similar to if you spilt Coke over a regular Lego piece and it's still like a little bit sticky because you just didn't clean it properly. The limbs have pretty inconsistent stiffness too, like the legs can be hard to move one way, then reach a point where they're pretty loose, then get stiff again. And his arms are kind of the same way, but to a much lesser and much more acceptable degree. Overall, this figure is pretty terrible all around. The hairpiece is horrible, the face print is flawed, and the rest of the figure isn't even remotely good enough to pass as him at a glance. It also has terrible quality standards to match this terrible design. 2 out of 10. This Morty minifigure is even worse, honestly. The hairpiece is a bit better, sure, but the face prints just don't work for me and are printed to a horribly low quality. His teeth are almost blacked out on one side because of how thick the printing is, and the other side has misaligned printing on his eyes and mouth. His torso print actually doesn't need to be there at all if you look at Morty in the show, but what's there is horribly done with a fuzzy outline and a skin tone that is, like Rick's, a shade too dark for some reason. He doesn't have any dual molded arms, which would have been nice, even though I know Lego also probably wouldn't have done that either. And in terms of articulation, one arm is fine, but the other was ludicrously stiff because there's some like hair and sticky residue stuck in his armpit area, which as I was trying to move it, actually produced a smell so horrible that I left the room to go wash my hands. I really didn't even want to touch this figure anymore, if I'm honest, because this was really vile. His footprinting is terrible too, suffers from opacity issues just like Lego themselves, terribly misaligned, the print is sloppy and messily done to a point that it's bleeding over onto the top of the foot, and holy shit, this smell was actually getting worse the longer that I held this figure. Awful figure, 0 out of 10, I actually don't want this around me anymore. And the last figure I wanted to have a look at is a direct sequel to the Luigi figure from last time, and I thought this new one actually looked good at a glance because they specially molded his headpiece just like I said they should do last time, and he came with a full-on go-kart build too. Unfortunately, this combo alone cost me €7, which is ridiculous. It did not come with instructions, was given to me pre-assembled, unlike the Skibidi Toilet figure, and it also seems to have been assembled incorrectly since Luigi is a little bit too close to the steering wheel. There's a weird amount of space at the front here that feels like it shouldn't be like that, and the rear wheels are only like half attached. But when it comes to the quality of this go-kart build, it's fucking appalling, and also a little bit disgusting too. I'm not sure if that smell is just lingering in the air from when I looked at Morty, but it seems to actually get worse anytime I separate two pieces that were attached to each other, which is just gross. The tires are made of hard plastic, not rubber, which means they don't grip to any surface, so you just end up scraping them along as opposed to rolling them, which just feels terrible. It does have a printed Luigi symbol on the front, but holy shit, this is actually the worst quality brick built product I've ever felt. Pieces don't click together, they just kind of mush into place as if there's an invisible layer of Play-Doh in between the bricks. Some pieces just refuse to be pushed together at all. Some don't want to come apart. And some just want to fly apart. It's actually impressive how differently each piece reacts to each other, considering there's only like 30 pieces in the set total. The Luigi figure itself is okay. The hat comes off in a really unsettling way. The face printing has a bunch of scratches taken out of it. The outlines of his hair printing are insanely fuzzy and inconsistent each side. The arms are insanely stiff, and the leg pieces have the absolute worst grip strength I've ever felt on a figure. It barely takes more than the force of gravity for them to fall off, which is a problem exacerbated by the fact that the seat has a surprisingly strong grip strength, which means the legs are always left behind whenever you remove this figure from the go-kart. Like, it is just not possible to remove it cleanly. The rest of the Luigi figure itself is mostly decent. Like, the printing is fine on the overalls and actually fairly good for the shoes, but this go-kart build feels intentionally horrible. And that smell is coming and going seemingly at random. 4 out of 10 figure, 0 out of 10 cart. This was a horrible experience, honestly. 3 for €10 isn't the worst, but that extra €7 for the Luigi and his disgusting go-kart, that has legitimately ruined my mood. Like, I knew it was going to be terrible going into it, but I still feel like I actually got scammed. Whatever, won't be doing that again anyway. But yeah, thanks for watching, and farewell.